Arizona is preparing to conduct executions of its death row inmates by using gas chambers. I'm not kidding. Not only are they planning on using a gas chamber in order to make this happen, they're planning on gassing death row inmates in the exact same way Nazis gassed Jews in Auschwitz, by using the same materials in the same way. And one thing you should keep in mind, if you happen to be a proponent of the death penalty, which I of course am not, but if you are, we do have constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. And so the real question is this cruel and unusual? And the answer is unequivocally yes. So let me give you those details. First, this was a story that was broken by The Guardian. And so Ed Pillington over at The Guardian was the one that reported on this, and the details are pretty brutal. So documents obtained by The Guardian reveal that Arizona's Department of Corrections has spent more than $2,000 in procuring the ingredients to make cyanide gas. The department bought a brick of potassium cyanide in December for a little over $1,500. It also, by the way, purchased sodium hydroxide, or hydroxide pellets, and sulfuric acid, which are intended to be used to generate the deadly gas. The gas chamber itself, which was built in 1949 and disused for 22 years, for good reason, by the way, has been dusted off and, according to the department, refurbished. So death row inmates in Arizona will be given a choice, right? Wow, how nice, they get a choice. And the choice is between a gas chamber or a different awful method of being executed. As The Guardian writes, inmates who choose the gas chamber are strapped into a chair in the center of the vessel. Colored levers are then used to drop the sodium cyanide into a pot of sulfuric acid under the chair, releasing the deadly hydrogen cyanide into the air. And again, I want to just emphasize, this was the exact method used in Auschwitz, and we're now using it here in the United States, in the state of Arizona, in the near future, in order to execute death row inmates. And as we've talked about on this show multiple times, the issue with, well, one of the many issues with the death penalty is that far too often we've found evidence using DNA of innocent people who had been wrongly convicted for crimes and were sent on death row, and luckily they were cleared of wrongdoing or exonerated as a result of DNA evidence. That in and of itself should persuade people that maybe we need to rethink this whole death row execution method of punishing people for crimes they've committed. We should also be considerate of the fact that, again, we are supposed to have constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. And when you look at the history of this method of execution, clearly there is some evidence of cruelty and unusual punishment. So for instance, the last person who was executed in the state of Arizona, not by a gas chamber, but by these lethal injections, was Joseph Wood in 2014. Joseph Wood took almost 2 hours to die when Arizona experimented on him with 15 doses of a then little used concoction of lethal injection drugs. An eyewitness told The Guardian that he counted Wood gasp and gulp 660 times. Now, when it comes to gassing death row inmates, the last time that happened in the state of Arizona was in 1982, and it was incredibly brutal. So Walter Legrand, a German national, was sentenced to death for a 1982 bungled armed bank robbery in which a man was killed. The Tucson Citizen published an eyewitness account of his 1999 execution. So his crime was in 1982 and his execution was in 1999, in which he displayed agonizing choking and gagging and took 18 minutes to die. So I don't know, I mean, you guys decide for yourselves. Does that sound like cruel and unusual punishment? Let me give you more. The Tucson Citizen published an eyewitness account of his 1999 execution in which he displayed agonizing choking and gagging and took 18 minutes to die. The witness room fell silent as a mist of gas rose, much like steam in a shower. And Walter Legrand became enveloped in a cloud of cyanide vapor, the Citizen reported. He began coughing violently, 3 or 4 loud hacks, and made a gagging sound before falling forward. The newspaper recorded that over many minutes, the inmate's head and arms twitched and his hands were red and clenched. So again, there's the issue of executing death row inmates and the flaws in our justice system, the very fact that innocent individuals get convicted for crimes that they did not commit. That already is a huge problem. And then you couple that with these methods of executing people, either by lethal injection, which is an option in Arizona, or by this gas chamber, which is very soon to be another option in Arizona. And so when you weigh what we're supposed to be protected by, the US Constitution, against these forms of executing people, we really need to ask ourselves, are we comfortable in easily signing off on those constitutional protections in an effort to get vengeance against someone who might be wrongly convicted of a crime? That's really the question to ask here. And it is kind of incredible how these red states have decided, yeah, you know, we're not gonna evolve on this issue. In fact, we wanna devolve on this issue. We wanna bring back firing squads, we wanna bring back gas chambers, we wanna use lethal injections with drugs that haven't really been fully tested and could actually make the entire process much more painful for the inmate that's being executed. All of these things we've seen happen in red states that have refused to do away with their death penalties. And when you really think about the impacts on our constitutional protections and also the flaws in our criminal justice system, it really makes you wonder if we're ever going to really rethink how we respond to crime in this country. Because clearly it hasn't worked. I mean, the death penalty hasn't served as a deterrent. We're experiencing a giant spike in homicides in the United States as we speak, even as these red states are rolling out more draconian methods and practices in regard to the death penalty. What we're doing with our overly punitive justice system isn't working. I'm not saying to be easy on crime. There's no question about that. I'm not saying that we should just let people who have murdered others just roam the streets free. I'm not saying that. But clearly what we're doing, these punitive measures haven't worked. We have incredibly high recidivism rates where people serve their time in prison, they're released, and then before you know it, they're back in prison, which means that there is a lack of rehabilitative characteristics in our prison system, clearly. And we spend so much money on it. We spend so much money on failing. And instead of maybe changing course, maybe going in the right direction for once, you've got red states that have decided, no, we're just gonna devolve further. We're gonna go in that direction.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.